Welcome back, everybody, to our studies of the law of the European Union. In this lesson, what we're going to do is talk about the European Council. So we're continuing our examination of the various different institutions of the European Parliament. We've talked about the Commission, we've talked about the Parliament. We're going to talk about the European Court of Justice in the future lessons as well. And this lesson, like I said, is going to focus on the European Council, some of the treaty law which essentially establishes the powers and the regulation of the European Council, as well as some of the processes by which voting takes place within the European Council as well. Essentially, what we did in the previous lesson was look at the structure, functions, and powers of the European Parliament. This lesson, we're going to do the exact same thing, but looking at the functions and structures and powers of the European Council instead. So, as a basic introduction, the Council is described as one of the key political institutions of the European Union. So what does this essentially mean? Well, it means that essentially what the Council will do is have the ability to direct the policy of the European Union, i.e. looking at the different kinds of policy directions that the European Union may go in and the ways in which this policy can be implemented within the various different institutions of the European Union. Its powers and functions are outlined in Article 15 of the Treaty on European Union, which we will get to in a second, but just as a very brief overview, therefore, when we talk about the kinds of institutions of the European Union, we have to think about the ones that have and bear some relevance to us as law students, as lawyers. We are talking about the law of the European Union, which means, of course, talking about institutions such as the Parliament and also the Commission and, of course, the European Court of Justice. But then there are also the political dimensions of the European Union as well. It is inherently a political institution. It is a political, legal, and economic institution. And so as a result of which the European Council plays quite a heavy role in the direction of policy of the European Union. And this is exemplified by Article 15 of the Treaty on European Union, because it says the following, and I quote, "The European Council shall provide the Union with the necessary impetus for its development, and shall define the general political directions and priorities thereof. It shall exercise legislative functions." This gives us two major elements. We have the political directions, the general political directions of the European Union, which is defined by the European Council as per this provision, but also it notes that the European Council has various legislative functions as well that go alongside this. The European Council shall consist of the heads of state or government of member states, together with its president and president of the Commission. The High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy shall take part in its work. This is just essentially giving us an outline of the members of the European Council. It is made up of the heads of state or heads of government of the member states of the European Union, and this is done in conjunction with the President of the European Council as well as the President of the European Commission. Part 3 says that the European Council shall meet twice every 6 months, convened by its president. When the agenda so requires, the members of the European Council may decide each to be assisted by a minister, and in the case of the president of the Commission, by a member of the Commission. When the situation so requires, the President shall convene a special meeting of the European Council. So this part is just exactly how stated, is examining and outlining the process by which the European Council will meet. It shall meet at least twice every 6 months, so on average of once every 3 months, give or take. And this is a convening done by the President of the Council. Except where the treaties otherwise provide, decisions of the European Council shall be taken by consensus. We'll get to that in a second. Part 5 says that the European Council shall elect its president by a qualified majority for a term of 2.5 years, renewable once. So you are able to have essentially 2 terms as president of the European Council. Similar to, for example, in the US, the president has 2 terms as well. You can renew your term once. In the event of an impediment or serious misconduct, the European Council can end the President's term of office in accordance with the same procedure. So in the same way that the European Council will elect its President by qualified majority, that same European Council can dismiss a President by qualified majority if there is, for example, an impediment or a serious misconduct which is performed by the President. Continuing on, the President of the European Council shall chair it and drive forward its work, shall ensure the preparation and continuity of the work of the European Council in cooperation with the President of the Commission and on the basis of the work of the General Affairs Council, shall endeavour to facilitate cohesion and consensus within the European Council, shall present a report to the European Parliament after each of the meetings to the European Council, etc., etc. There are other elements that can be cited here. I'm just trying to summarise Article 15 as quickly as possible. But this gives us a number of different things. It gives us the general policy direction of the European Council, essentially what the European Council ought to do, how it ought to operate as a political institution, driving forward policy of the European Union. It also outlines quite a significant number of powers that are given and granted to the elected president. The elected president, which is done on the basis of a term of 2.5 years, which is renewable once and is done by a qualified majority. The President of the European Council, like I said in the previous slide, and as stated in Article 15, is elected by the members of the European Council, and this is done by the process of qualified majority voting. The newly elected President will serve for a period of 30 months, so specifically the amount of months that they can exactly they can serve for, they can run through. And the President of the European Council is also an EU-only rule. So what does this essentially mean, an EU-only role? Well, it essentially means that where a new president is elected, remember that members of the European Council derive out of the heads of state or heads of government of member states. But when a new president is elected, that individual who is then elected as the president of the European Council is no longer able to serve as a representative of their member state. This gives them essentially EU representation only. They are only going to represent the European Union as well as the Union's political and policy driving interests, which is an important thing to note, specifically when we're talking about the role of and the interrelationship that is had between the institutions of this supranational organization of the European Union and the member states who form the membership of the European Union as well.